over 60 people. Most of the growth was done organically, so we are quite proud with the success we've had. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I launched a second company called Revenue Practice Management, and the purpose of that company is to help practitioners have better success. And I guess how that came about is as I'm learning and finding out how to finally make a little bit of money at this practice, I realized that I had some knowledge that I could possibly share with other practitioners, and started this other company in where I share what I've learned over the years. So I'll be doing a little bit of that as well today, and kind of sharing with you how we use this product for our firm and the benefits it has had for us.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here with us today, Mr. Talbot. As for myself, my name is David Carroll. I've worked with Thomson Reuters for a number of years. I actually started off my career in technical support. Did that for a little while, transitioned over to more of a training role. After doing that for a bit, I moved over to more of a sales role. Did that for a couple of years. Then actually I left Thomson Reuters for about 4 years to work with an accounting firm startup. They were 100% cloud-based accounting firm. And I did more of a business development and IT sort of activities. And then last fall, Thomson Reuters reached out to me to ask me about joining them back into the fold as a sort of a consultant, helping firm owners, improve and grow their firms. So I've been doing that since the fall. It's been a lot of fun. All right, with those introductions out of the way, let's jump right in. So, let's start with practice management. Now, this can mean different things to different people. Some people will have one platform to manage everything. Some folks will use a couple of different pieces and stitch them together to run their practice. But in terms, what it actually does, the way I think of it is it's a scalable way to effectively decentralize, your brain. Now, when you start your practice, you're on your own. You've got a handful of clients. It's pretty easy to keep track of deadlines, customers. There's no real need to put in, SOPs or standard operating procedures, as it's just you. But as you scale your business, there's going to be a pretty definitive ceiling as to how many clients and how many staff that you can manage in your head without getting some outside help. Think of it in a metaphor. When you're riding a bike, it's pretty easy to maneuver and know what's going on. But if you're going to transition over to flying a jet, something that's orders of magnitude more complex, you're going to really need to rely on dashboards, instruments, and gauges to fly effectively. So what are some of the things that practice management tool can do to help you? Well, a good practice management solution, it should offer the ability for you to really track all of your firm's projects. It should help you manage and balance your employee workload. There should definitely be some CRM functionality in there. There should be some time capture, billing functionality. We're not going to do a deep dive into any of those aspects. Today, we really wanted to place a lot of importance and focus on data and reporting. And a good practice management solution should really offer that kind of data insights for you. At Thomson Reuters, we actually offer 2 types of practice management tools. So we have Onvio, which is a 100% cloud-based practice management tool. This is I would say, somewhat newish platform that we have. It's something that Thomson Reuters is really investing a lot of R&D dollars in. The benefits of having it cloud-based is you really don't have to worry about backups. You don't have to worry about, losing timed updates. You can really, access all of your data as long as you have internet, access. You can access it anywhere. It can really help if you're looking to set up a remote team, which, during this COVID context, that's become, a lot more salient. And this platform is really something that's going to grow and evolve over time. I know that next year we're going to actually be able to file T1 returns out of Onvio as well. So that's going to be pretty exciting to have a cloud-based compliance product. The other practice management tool that we have is our DT Practice platform. This has a lot of the same functionality, even more so than Onvio. It's really more of an enterprise-oriented practice management solution. It's going to have a lot of the same functionality as Onvio, but it's really going to be more developed and more customizable. So those are the two that we're currently running. And I know Jean-Guy has adopted the DT Practice in his firm. It's been a number of years now. So today I want to focus on KPIs. If you're not familiar, that's key performance indicators. I want to focus on KPIs and making data-driven decisions. I kind of stumbled upon this quote. I kind of like it. If you can measure it, you can improve it. I think that's pretty bang on. With both Onvio and DT Practice, you're going to be entering time. You're going to be creating projects. You're going to be billing and a whole lot more as well. Your practice management tool is going to have really a treasure trove of data for you to draw upon in the form of reporting. And these KPIs, they're going to empower you to evaluate staff performance, get an understanding of how your projects are performing, what client margins look like, and they're going to allow you to effectively and efficiently allocate your resources at your firm. So today there's going to be two KPIs I'm going to focus on. During our Q&A, I'm sure we're going to take a look at a whole lot more as well. But yeah, let's take a look at realization rates and utilization rates. And if any of you have spent any time working for a large firm, you're probably pretty familiar with these terms. I know they like to use them quite a bit. Let's get started with utilization rates. So utilization rate, the utilization rate comes from the number of hours an employee works divided by their total availability over time. Okay, what does that mean? So I'll give you an example. If you have an employee that works 40 hours a week and every single hour during that week is billable, then they'll have a 100% utilization rate or a 1 utilization rate. That's probably pretty rare. That might lead to burnout if you do have that kind of employee. That could be pretty awesome. So why is this an important metric? Well, for a number of reasons. It's important for you to know these numbers so that you can make better staffing decisions and drive profitability. So, for instance, if an employee has a high utilization rate, then that might these reports might be used to justify bonuses or increases in salary. If you run these reports and you find that maybe one or more of your staff has a lower utilization rate, then that might signal that you need to offer additional resources, additional training for your staff to bring that utilization rate up. So that's one key metric that I know a lot of firm owners really value is the utilization rate. The next KPI that we want to focus on is the realization rate. And that's the total number of hours invoiced to the client divided by the total number of hours charged on the job. So again, highlight that with an example. Maybe you're preparing a notice to reader and you're charging $1,000. You'd probably be charging more, but just for this example, let's say you're charging $1,000 and the number of hours that you're working on this project is really excessively more than it ought to be. So, the partner or the firm owner charges out for $800. Well, your realization rate for this particular project is going to be in the 80% range for that particular project. Now, realization rates, we can look at it in two sort of lenses. One is a staffing tool and one as a pricing tool. So a poor realization rate, once you identify a project that's not performing so great, it might mean that it's not properly staffed or it's not being done efficiently. So to provide extra context, maybe you have someone that's at your firm that's just a real tax expert or a real wizard, but you're getting them to do some bookkeeping and it's just, you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So that realization rate might uncover that for you. Additionally, from a pricing perspective, a poor realization on a job could mean that the ceiling on the job is too low. And when you first had that pricing discussion with your client, the expectations weren't necessarily well put out there at the beginning. So you might have to revise your pricing with your client, and you'll be able to show them data if needed to sort of justify why you're moving their pricing up. Okay, so I know we took, that's a lot of information. A lot of that is sort of theoretical. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to shift gears, do a bit of a Q&A with Mr. Talbot. And I think this discussion is going to reveal some key insights and show how a lot of this theory plays out in practice. Mr. Jean-Guy, are you ready for the first question?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Let's jump right in. So what I want to ask you is, at what point during your journey, you said you were in practice for 30 years, what point did you realize that you needed a practice management solution?
Yeah. One of the things that was really strange and how I got onto that is that I didn't even realize that I needed it. It was actually a mentor of mine who I was working with, and he suggested I should have a proper payment billing solution that would monitor the workflow, monitor everybody's utilization, realization. I didn't even know what those things were. And I still remember him proposing that to me in February, and I was thinking, well, there's not a chance, and I'm going to implement that just before tax season. Right. And the guy just about had a bird on me. He says, if you're not going to take me seriously, then don't bother. So I figured, okay, Grant, I'll do it now. And I still remember, implementing that just before tax season. And I remember him making the promise that it would impact my bottom line by at least $5,000. Now, keeping in mind, this is about 20 some odd years ago. So back then, $5,000 was worth even more. And then a few months later, I call him back, says, Grant, you promised me that implementing the software would have an impact of at least $5,000 on my bottom line. Well, I'm sorry to say that you lied. It's way more than $5,000. The impact that it had on my practice was immediate. But I must say, in the months to come, in the years to come, I learned how to use the software even better. And now the difference it makes to my bottom line is in the hundreds of thousands. I'm convinced of that. It's not just a few $1,000s. It's an unbelievable investment if you know how to use it properly and milk it for all it's worth.
That's a good point. I think that's a good caveat is, you definitely need to be pretty thoughtful, when it comes to doing the setup and the implementation for sure. That's interesting that you implemented it right before tax season. That's I commend you on your bravery. I think a lot of people would be a little bit intimidated to such an ambitious project in February.
Yeah, well, I didn't like it, but Grant was insistent, so did it anyways. Yep.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yep. So actually, this is a pretty good segue into our next question. Implementing a practice management solution. Obviously, that's going to require not only financial investment, but a significant time investment. I think I know where you're going to go with this answer, but did you find that you realized a return on investment for setting up practice? And if that's the case, how so?
Yeah, for us, it was immediate. On several fronts. For us, where the biggest difference was is that I guess I had no idea of how much stuff we were giving away. So unless you start really tracking your time and recording it and all of that, you're going to find yourself as well as your team giving away way more than you thought possible. So that was, to me, one of the huge benefits of implementing it. The training and the learning and all that, of course, is somewhat costly. But once you get the thing up and running, like, well, just to give you an example, we just hired 2 new people yesterday. And we probably spent maybe half an hour showing them how to use DT for our needs. And we may not have shown them everything, but enough for them to get by. So the investment, once you get it up and running, is the learning curve is very, very short after that. So it's not costly once you get this thing up and running.
Sure. So it sounds like maybe a little bit of short-term pain, but for some pretty long-term gain moving forward.
Correct.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, when you dove into the reporting and the data, you uncovered that you were leaving money on the table. That's interesting.
Well, yeah, that's what was happening, and what would happen, and you were talking about utilization, and what I discovered is some of my employees that I thought were rock stars, that I thought were really, really, performing well. We would take a look at the utilization, and it was hovering, say, at 75%. So to clarify, that means that only 75% of their time was being charged to a client. And so over time, we developed a coding system that really allowed me to dissect what the heck these guys were doing when they weren't charging out their time. So one of the things we fine-tuned over the years is to have a coding system that is extremely sophisticated. It seems cumbersome, but then what it does is that the reporting that you get out of that will really provide unbelievable information to the practitioners to what everybody's doing. So to give you an example, the employees would have, say, 75% utilization, and then when I go through the reports, I'd see that, say, 5, 6, or 7% of their time was spent responding to emails. So then when I'd approach that employee, says, okay, so 7% of your time, if you're working 2,000 hours, that's a crap load of hours responding to emails. Who the hell are you responding to? And then they'd say, well, I'm responding to clients with their questions. Okay, well, that's chargeable. Why are you putting that down as non-chargeable? And that's just one example of the things employees would be doing, like reading and research. They put time to reading and research. Just what are you reading and researching about? Well, the client came and asked questions about this particular tax problem, and I spent 5 hours researching it. Then why are you not charging that to the client? So I realized that I was picking up the tab for a crap load of work that the employees were doing for my clients, but we were never charging the client for. So with that information, then I could train my team to be a lot more diligent in charging for everything they did and quit giving stuff away. And so now if you can increase someone's utilization from 75 to 90%, the difference it makes to your bottom line is unbelievable. And to maybe add to that, I did at one point in time quantify what it means. And I did the math, and my calculations show that if you can increase someone's utilization, and it depends, of course, what their charge-out rate, effective rates are, and all of that. But by and large, if you can increase someone's utilization by just even 10%, without changing their charge-out rate, without changing their effective rate, just improving their utilization by 10% can make a difference between $10,000 to $25,000 per employee. So if you get 10 employees, you can all improve them by 10% each. Well, you're going to see like $150,000 to $200,000 different to your bottom line. It's mind-boggling.
That's pretty substantial.
It is, but again, you got to have the proper coding system and the proper setup to allow you to get that information out of the software. So it's garbage in, garbage out. So you got to have a system that allows you to put in the information a certain way that allows you to extract what your team is really doing. And David, you were there when I made the presentation in French this morning, and I explained to that team that here at Talbot and Associates, we actually re-implemented DT practice 3 times. So what happened is we set it up, and then we realized how powerful the software was. There's certain information that I needed that I couldn't get out, and not because of the software limitations, but because of the way we had set it up. And we did not have a detailed enough coding system. So we kind of scrapped what we had done, started it up a second time, and then the reports just became unbelievably better. A few years goes by, we realized, hey, if we entered our information differently and he had set up differently, we would have even better data. So scrap that one again, started up a third time.
Wow.
But what happens with every time we set it up, the information that I can get out of the software is mind-boggling. So it's a matter, like I said, and I keep telling accountants, if you're going to set it up, make sure you talk to someone who has used it, maybe to the extent that we have, to really give you some fine-tuning for your firm on how to set it up, because it can make a huge difference in what you can get out of the reports.
Yeah, no, that's some good insight, Jean-Guy. That's interesting that you had to sort of recalibrate it, and as you got more comfortable, you're like, all right, let's go deeper into the weeds and see, how crazy we can get with our reporting. That's awesome.
Well, yeah, and I think part of the problem is that it took us a few years to become aware of the strength of the software.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like anybody who uses Excel, right? You use it to add up a few columns, and you realize that it can do a hell of a lot more. And then you realize, well, maybe I should just use it more than just adding up columns. So it's the same thing here.
That's a pretty apt analogy.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Actually, that kind of made me think of something. Did you experience any pushback from your employees when it came to, logging their time?
Yes.
You did. Okay. How did you overcome that resistance? You beat them.
no, and actually, and the reason I'm chuckling and I'm hesitating is because the pushback that I got from my employees wasn't great.
Mhm.
Even worse is the pushback I get from practitioners whom I recommend DT practice, and I get tremendous pushback from the owners. And the reason for that is when we recommend DT practice and how they should set it up, we are really big into really breaking down your time into what they always find to be ridiculously anal extent. And so they don't fully appreciate what you can do with that information. So it's a little bit like someone doing an income statement and saying, well, I'm not going to have 25 expense accounts. I'm just going to have 3. I'm going to have cost of rent, cost of employees, and then miscellaneous. Well, you can do that. It sure makes the bookkeeping a hell of a lot simpler. It sure makes printing financial statements a hell of a lot simpler. And then if somebody comes along and says, well, actually, maybe you should break down your income statement into 20 categories, well, the person may say, well, I've already got by with 3. Why would I have 20? Well, if you break it down into 20, the amount of information that you can make a decision with now improves tremendously. So this is kind of the same thing. So I tend to have pushback, and I've had a few cases where the employer completely refused to set it up the way we had recommended. They went their own way, and then 2-3 years later, they realized that they're not getting the data that they need to properly run their practice. And then they kind of, come back with their tail between their legs, says, okay, Shaggy, let us have it. We're going to set it up the way you recommend. And then and invariably, every time they do it, they come back and says, holy crap, I should have done that 3 years ago. And the same thing with people who even push back getting the software at all. They keep saying, how the hell did I manage without this thing all these years? Like, it was so stupid to push back. So going back to your initial question, did I get pushback from my employees? Not for long, because it doesn't take long, maybe a month or 2, then they kind of start seeing already the value in the data that I can get and how I can help them with that data. So that is huge. And especially here, everybody gets paid they get paid by the hour, but at the end of the day, their bonuses and their wages for next year will be greatly dependent on their productivity. And because the software allows me to really measure the productivity to no end and provide advice on how to improve productivity, now there are a lot more, let's just say, yeah, they're happy with getting the information. Says, okay, now I know what I need to work on to increase my productivity, and at the end of the day, make more money. So it doesn't take long for them to kind of say, okay, now I understand why I need to be put through this ringer and enter the data the way I do. So the pushback is very short-lived. Actually, there's a few employees that really appreciate it. It was really weird how they kind of liked they liked it better this way with more details. So it was interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I mean, I know, from my experience when I was working at a firm, we want it to be super, bleeding edge, super progressive. We're not going to do any timesheets, all fixed pricing.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of value to doing it that way. But then we're like, are we making any money?
Well, this is it.
How much time are we spending on these projects?
Exactly, and I find that there are people who even wrote books who are, advocating against having timesheets. And every time I hear that, I cringe and I go nuts. It's so silly. It's a little bit like a car manufacturer saying we're going to price our car based on what the market will bear. So they produce a car, says, oh, we can probably get $40,000 for that car. Do you not think they know what the hell that car cost them to build it?
Yeah.
And have an idea as to where they could maybe be a little bit more efficient with their pricing and all that? Of course they do. But we're going to be different in an accounting practice and not have that information available to us? How silly is that?
I don't want to go too deep into the pricing. Maybe that'll be like our next webinar that we do. But it can definitely be pretty, volatile conversation.
Agreed, but I think something that everybody needs to walk away today with is that the time and billing system is more of a mechanism for you to determine what is the cost of providing a service at retail. So I keep telling people, even if you have the best time and billing system, I don't care. Always price your services as if you had no timesheets. Based on the value of what you're providing, and then your timesheet will provide you details more on how efficient you are at providing that particular service and whether or not you should continue providing that particular service, given the cost that it takes to produce it.
I think that's really well said. Well said, Jungi. So actually, I'm going to jump into the next question. Oops. So now that you've learned how to use DT Practice, you're the DT Practice wizard. We kind of touched upon this already, but maybe you can elaborate. What difference do you believe it's made to your bottom line?
I have to do the math for my own company, but I'm not exaggerating when I say that the difference just utilization can make to your bottom line is between $10,000 and $30,000 with just utilization. What I didn't talk about is, well, what if you were to increase realization by, say, even just $10 per hour? What difference does that make to your bottom line? Well, it's very significant again. So if I look at all the practices that I help, as a general rule of thumb, almost invariably, once you start using the software, especially with a little bit of coaching, like someone like myself, on how to read the reports and how to react to the reports and do the proper things that's needed based on the data provided, usually we can increase the utilization by 10 to 15% per employee as a general rule of thumb. And as a general rule, especially once they learn value building and all that, they're also going to see their realization go up by 10 to 15 or to $20 per hour. And then once you combine that, then you kind of the difference it will usually make is about $40,000 per employee. So if a person has 10 employees, and usually it takes a few years to get there because there's so much learning and fine-tuning to be done.
No doubt.
It might take you several years to get to that $40,000 swing to your bottom line. But
sure.
that is the kind of result that I'm seeing in using the software properly.
That's some serious pocket change there.
It's mind-boggling, and a lot of people don't believe me, and they say, okay, well, try with your practice. Let's just see. And then a few years goes by, says, holy crap, I'm starting to see the difference. And like I keep telling you, you haven't seen it all yet. Give yourself 2 more years. You're going to see where it really lands. It's unbelievable.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, when you first implemented DT Practice and, started getting deep in the weeds, you had, access to your KPIs, reporting, data. Was there a report that kind of stood out to you and sort of maybe challenged some of your assumptions?
Yeah, I still remember the first time I printed off my effective reports. So that's the report that gives me both the utilization and realization. And so the first being employee number 001, the first one that I print off is my own. And I'm looking at my own time and I'm saying, holy crap, I had no idea I was wasting so much time on stupid crap. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow is fire this idiot, which was me, right?
Oops.
And then you go down your team and you realize that they're all giving away tons of time or being inefficient and doing things for the firm that really has little or no benefit. So the amount of training and reorganization that we had to do was unbelievable. So to give you an example, an employee might be spending a considerable amount of time doing non-chargeable work for the firm, but their charge-out rate is, say, $150 per hour. And I'm going to say, well, why are you doing all these things? And they're going to say, well, it needs to get done. And I said, I agree it needs to get done, but not by you.
Not by you, yeah.
So you need to delegate this stuff to other people. That's why we've got an admin team. So there was tremendous adjustments that need to be done. And like I said, I was the first one in there, and I saw how much time I was doing things that my admin team could be doing.
Interesting.
Then I had to get smarter with my own time, and every month I get these reports out, and I hit myself on the head for being such an idiot with my own time. But over months and years, you fine-tune your own process, and you become a lot more diligent about how you spend your time. And that was huge. That was phenomenal.
Interesting. So you're able to sort of shift your focus onto more high-impact activities.
Yes. And so utilization was one thing, and then we take a look at the realization. And then you look at certain employees and you say, okay, so in our firm, we've divided up our codes. So the 3000s is year-end presentation, the 4000s is bookkeeping, 5000s is T4, T5 preparation, and 6000s is T1 preparation, so on and so forth. So I can easily say or determine within my firm what are the things they're good at and the things that they're weak at. So I would take a look at employee A, and we'll call that person Mary, and Mary's always getting a write-down with her bookkeeping. But I notice whenever it comes time to doing T1s, boy, she really rocks at it. So then I have a decision to make. I can approach Mary and say, okay, Mary, let's face it, you really suck at doing bookkeeping, but you really rock at doing T1s. So we have two options. One is we forbid you from doing bookkeeping from here on in. We'll delegate it to somebody else who's good at it, because you're not. And we'll just have you do T1s. Or conversely, if you really love doing bookkeeping, then we'll invest some time and energy in training you how to get better at doing bookkeeping so that you no longer suck at it.
Interesting.
Now, needless to say, the language that I use may not be quite this blatant, but the message is still loud and clear, right? You gotta either have them concentrate and do more of the things they're good at, or get better at the things that they're not so good at. And 9 times out of 10, what ends up happening is that you'll soon discover that they don't particularly like doing bookkeeping.
They don't like doing it. Okay.
Yeah, so you say, okay, well, if you don't like doing it, that explains why you suck at it, so we're going to give it to somebody else, right? And the reason so their strengths and their likes and dislikes will usually come out through those reports.
Interesting. It kind of goes back to what I was saying before. It helps you allocate your resources. In this case, human capital, human resources in a more efficient manner.
Of course.
Look at that data and be like, okay, well, this person needs to be working on T1s. Forget the bookkeeping.
Yeah, and the way we've broken it down is I can even tell if a person has such as just doing bank recs. So I can really kind of narrow it down as to what parts of a file does that person struggle with.
Interesting.
Okay, so they're always
getting really that granular.
Exactly. So then I noticed, okay, this person really not good at doing GST reconciliations and all that. So again, either we train them from doing that or get them out of doing that. But the more granular you get, the better you can manage your team and help them become more productive. And that's where the pushback comes, right, is until you've received that data, you don't know you need it. So you go back to having an income statement that only has 3 items on it. So your profits go down. You're saying, well, why did it go down? I don't know. I've got only one expense. How can I tell which one is out of control? But the more granular you get, then the better you can get at making the right decisions.
That makes perfect sense. Awesome. Next question I was curious, what are some of the metrics that you're measuring with regards to employees? We talked a little bit about it before. Maybe you can expand a bit, and how are you using that data?
Yeah, so as far as employee evaluations, the reports, we print off several reports, like on a monthly basis, I print off we call it our efficiency report. That report tells me everybody's effective charge-out rate for every task that they do. And so just to be clear, the difference between effective rate and charge-out rate, your effective rate is what are you really getting per hour for the jobs that you're doing. Because I can have a charge-out rate of $100 per hour, but if every month when the time comes for me to invoice, I keep bringing my invoice down from $1,000 to $800, then my realization drops down to 80%. Well, guess what? I'm no longer charging out at 100, I'm charging out at 80, so my effective rate will be $80 per hour. So one of the things I look at very closely is everybody's effective rate for every different task that you do. The second report we print off is a report that shows me their overall effective rate on a month-to-month basis. I want to see that effective rate continually increase. So if someone starts for me, they may have an effective rate that really sucks. Am I concerned? Well, I might be, but if I see it increasing month after month after month, then my concerns go down, right? And then the other report that we print off on a weekly basis is everyone's utilization. So at the end of each week, I take a look at everyone's utilization. So if anybody falls below their target, and so in our firm here, all of our accountants, the people who do all the working paper files and all that, their utilization, I expect it to be over 90. So if anybody then drops down to 80% in any given week, I'm going to investigate what happened in that week for them to have dropped. Now, if I find that they went to a seminar, spent 2 days in a seminar, well, okay, I'm good. I understand why it dropped.
Sure.
But, and let's face it, people will respect what you inspect. So now because they know that I'm inspecting their utilization on a weekly basis, they are very concerned about wasting time on doing things that's non-chargeable. And if they are going to spend time doing something that's non-chargeable, they know that I will pick up on it, and they know I will question it. It's not necessarily bad. So they'll say, yes, Jackie, you're right. My utilization was only 60%, but look at what I did with that 40%. I did this, 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 and that was very beneficial for the firm. And I say, congratulations, good thinking. I love it. We're good.
I love that approach.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So, and again, people think that I'm hard on my employees, that I keep slapping them for whenever their utilization goes down, realization goes down. But in fact, I use these reports a lot more for the opposite, in fact, to reward them. So whenever somebody has a utilization of, 2-3 weeks in a row where they're hitting 100%, well, I blast an email out, congratulations to Gerald, who got 100% yet again this week. He's a phenomenal, and so on and so forth. And that really pumps them up, right? So I do a lot more rewarding than I do criticism with these reports, because I find that tends to get better results.
Yeah, no doubt. So more carrot than stick from Jackie.
Oh, big time, big time.
Good. That's
but
good.
It's not to say that I don't take out the stick either.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Similar question. What are some of the metrics that you're measuring with regards to clients? And how are you using that data?
Yeah, so as I was explaining, I do a lot of mentoring. I help a lot of firms, and in the process of doing that, I also do quite a few presentations all over Canada and even in the States on practice management. And one of the things that I always bring up at those presentations is that you have to be aware that your clients have a report card on you. May not be consciously, it's probably in the subconscious, and they probably don't tell you about it, but you do have a report card on you. So the things that are going to be on that report card, for example, is the receptionist. So when they come in, if the receptionist is really nice to them, they may give that receptionist an A. And if she's not, well, they're going to give her a C or a D. And then they're going to take a look at the cleanliness of the office. If it looks like a pigsty, well, they're probably going to give you a D or an F. But if it looks immaculate and inviting and everything's good, you'll get an A. So one of the things that I always tell my clients is that do a report card on yourself. So first of all, determine what are the things that you think should be on that report card. And then once you determine what are the things that people are going to evaluate on, try to score yourself. And try to be honest with yourself, and even better yet, get a few of your clients to score you. Now, undoubtedly, you should have on that report card timeliness. People will judge you based on the timeliness of the engagements that you provide, of the work that you do. So if they're bringing you their data and they're expecting to get the financials back in 2 months, but you get it back to them in 4 months, guess what kind of score you're going to get? Well, they're probably going to give you a D for timeliness. How good is that? Well, first of all, they're probably going to be a little bit more irked at whatever fees you charged, and the odds are of them referring you has really gone down.
They're not going to be an advocate. You know, it's really interesting that you mentioned that. You know, when I was working at the firm, I did a lot of, business development, and one question I would ask potential new clients, if they're working with an accountant, why are you thinking of changing your relationship with your accountant? And man, 9 times out of 10, it was either 1, I never heard from the guy, or 2, exactly what you were saying, that he just took forever to get back, my deliverables.
Yeah, and I'd be willing to bet that the third one never returned my calls.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it. It takes forever to return my calls, forever to return my emails.
Yeah.
I can't get a hold of the guy.
Yeah.
That was such a consistent theme across the board.
Of course, and very seldom is it fees.
Oh, it was almost never fees.
No, fees comes down like at number 9 or 10. They've got 10 things on a report card that's more important than the fees. And the thing is that you got to be careful about. They may say it's the fees. Well, it's not the fees per se. It's the fees they're paying for the
value.
Exactly, for what you're providing them. So if you're taking 6 months to produce financial statements, well, they're going to say, well, the fees are horrible, given that it takes them 6 months.
Right.
But they're forgetting to mention that part. And
yeah.
Say it's the fees. So in our firm, one of the things we always do is when the client comes in, we always ask them, okay, so what are the reports going to be used for? When do you want them by? So on and so forth. And most clients will say, well, I need them for the bank by this date, whatever. What we then do is we'll put a date in DT practice of a deadline. And by and large, we aim to have the financial statements out within 30 days for most of our clients for year-end financial statements. So pick a number. It could be more than 30, less than 30. It's up to you. But we will vary up to some degree depending on the client, what their expectations are, and so on and so forth, and the size of the engagement, of course. But we put a date into our system, and then every 2 weeks or so, one of my people here who generates the reports will come and see me and says, okay, Jean-Guy, here are the 48 files we've got in queue. Most of them are on track, but we've got these 4 files that are 3 days away from the deadline. And I spoke to the employee, and they don't think they're going to make the deadline. And we've got these 3 files that are over the deadline by 5 days. What do you want me to do? So now I am fully aware of the turnover time of my practice. Are we hitting those 30 days or whatever goal we set for ourselves for that client? And if not, I'm aware of it and I can act on it. So I never get a call from a client asking me where the hell's my work at and why is it not in my hands. Well, I'm not caught by surprise because, hell, I get a report every month.
Oh, that's great. I love that. That's definitely a good use case for reporting that I hadn't considered.
Exactly. So then the other thing is that once you see that you're over that limit, then you can call the client and says, remember we told you we'd have it done in 6 weeks? Well, it's going to be more like 7. Clients are unbelievably forgiving if you tell them 2 weeks in advance that you're going to be a week late. What they get pissed off as is when you promise them it'd be done in 6 weeks and it's not. And you never told them you'd be over. So just tell them, look, I'm not hitting it. I'm not able to get it to you in that time. And so what we tend to do is whatever time the client tells us that they want it by, so they say, I want it back in 45 days. In our system, we're probably going to put something more like 35 days. Because what we want to do is impress the client. So if the client expects it in 45, you get it done in 35, they're going to think, wow, this guy really rocks. And it's a matter, let's face it, they're going to judge you based on what they expected. So if they expect little from you and you deliver better, you're good. So we keep promising less and delivering more.
Seems like a pretty solid way of running the business.
But it's hard to do without something like DT to monitor that.
That's a good point.
Unless you've only got 5 clients, then it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
I can probably remember.
Yeah.
Like in our case where we do about a little over 6,000 T1s.
Okay.
That's a lot of stuff to monitor. So to make sure that our T1s are rolled over in 5 days, well, how else are you going to do it unless you got a software that monitors that?
I wouldn't want to manage 6,000 T1s with a whiteboard or a Word document.
No, exactly. Exactly.
Not exactly scalable.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. My last question, what has impressed you most about DT practice?
For me, as the CEO, and I'm sure, David, you could go around the office and ask everybody here, and they're all going to give you a different answer. But I'm going to tell you from my point of view is the ability to extract information. I can't tell you how many times I would go see Rich, because Rich is our IT guy who really knows DT here. And I'm going to say, Rich, I really like to know whatever information that I want regarding clients, employees, efficiency, whatever. Can you generate such a report? And Rich would say, well, I don't know if we can or not. Let me find out. And sure enough, 2 hours later, he came back and says, is this what you're looking for? And I think, yeah, that's exactly what I want. And I said, okay, this is all really good, but it'd be really nice if it was presented this way instead. Oh, okay. An hour later, he came back and says, is this what you're looking for? This is exactly what I'm looking for. Now, what I've just shared with you is something that has happened time and time and time and time again. It's like I found there's just no end to what this thing is capable of doing. But that goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, is that there's certain reports I would ask for Rich, and Rich says, oh, I could, but the data is not recorded in such a way that allows me to extract that information. So that's why we had to reset up our DT a few times for me to be able to extract that information because of the way the information was entered.
Okay,
But,
so there's a little bit of recalibration that needs to be done.
Yeah, and like I said, this is my perspective, but again, talk to other people in the firm and they'll give you whole different reasons why they think this is an unbelievably powerful tool. But for me as an owner, it's the data that I need to run this practice and make money at it. It's unbelievable.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot of fun. That's almost brings us pretty close to the end of our hour. I had a blast. Jean-Guy, I think we should start a podcast together.
Yeah, and you know, before you let me go, you know, if people want to visit my website, so Talbot and Associates, and look that up, you're going to find our firm. But the other one is Revenue Practice Management. If you want to email me some of your questions, because I can see people hearing this and saying, okay, well, now they would like to get a practitioner's perspective on how to use the software. I'd be happy to have, you know, to respond to your emails, to your questions, and let you know how I would approach it. And I know you guys are phenomenal at providing technical support, but sometimes people want to hear it from an accounting practice instead on how to set it up, and we'd be happy to share some information with you.
That's amazing, Jean-Guy. It's super appreciated. Yeah, so we'll probably just follow up with folks that have tuned in. We'll set you up with you know, recorded video of our webinar today. We'll certainly include, you know, both our contact information. So folks, you know, if you have any questions, don't be shy to reach out to either one of us. Jean-Guy, I know you got a lot sort of in the pipeline as well. I know you started a YouTube channel as well where people can check out some of your awesome content.
That's been a lot of fun, actually.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. Terrific. Well, thanks so much for hanging out, man. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I hope people that tuned in enjoyed it as much as I did. And with that, I think we'll we'll end today's session.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. Take care, Janki.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.